I guess everybody has a different opinion on everything that works. Sim's idea and beliefs on this whole thing basically kicked us all on the butt. And I guess that's why you need summits like this, because we're all here to speak about our own opinions and beliefs independently. We're all individuals with a different look at things around the world, at things in life, about the way we live our daily lives. And we can always learn from somebody else's difference in opinion going forward. It's been an interesting discussion. I mean, not once did I ever nod off. And I think that's important when it comes to what many would refer to as a talk shop. I mean, that's what summits are called. But the varied opinions and discussions about this issue was so interesting that I think it makes you think about it differently. It gave you an idea of the situation and what we're looking at in a totally different way. You know, something you wouldn't have generally thought about sitting at home when you decided to attend this summit. At the end of it, I'm going to wrap up exactly what we've discussed, the way going forward. But before we get to that, let's hear from the keynote speaker of today's summit. And I just want to give a little background on why we're actually calling her the keynote speaker. It's mainly because of everything she's achieved in her life. And we want to be inspired by an entrepreneur, a business person, not just someone who's a member of the LGBTI community. Because in a nutshell, overall, ultimately, this is about business. And it is about making a difference in society as business entrepreneurs. Phuthi Mahaniele is South Africa's business executive. She's the chief executive officer of Sigma Capital. She was included, get this, in the Wall Street Journal's list of top 50 women in the world to watch in 2008. That tells you she's been making waves for a long time. That tells you that her reach goes beyond our borders for the Wall Street Journal to actually recognize her. She was also recognized as the leading African woman in business in 2012. And here's another thing that has me on the floor. She was also chosen as the Forbes Woman Africa Businesswoman of the Year in 2014. So it is, of course, with great esteem, privilege, honor that we actually get to hear from her today and give us the keynote address at South Africa's first LGBTI summit, business summit.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. It's wonderful to be here. Hi. So Shegesha called me last night and said, Phuthi, bona. I've got a conference. Nikki can make it. Nikki Newton-King, who was supposed to be here, the CEO of the JSE. So you're going to be there.
Yeah.
And all I said was, okay. Because that's what you say to Shegesha. You don't like, you know. But thank you. It's wonderful to be here. It really it's wonderful to be a part of this community and to talk to you because this is actually the first time that I have this conversation with the LGBTI community. I'm really thankful for this. So Shegesha, as much as it might have seemed been a bit of a a push, but I'm very thankful. So just looking at the previous conversation, and Dawn spoke about exclusion. And I think certainly for me, exclusion is something that I have without a doubt, confronted. And I think when we heard earlier from Sim, I was kind of like in my seat, sort of like pushing back, but as was mentioned, he is an agent provocateur, however you pronounce that, So I say this because of the challenges that I have experienced as a black woman. So what I'll tell you is that in 1989, my parents sent me to the US to go and study for my undergrad university. I was 2 years old. So when I then left there, I did it was a 4-year degree, and I happened to finish what I was supposed to do in 3 years. But I decided I was going to stay there for 4 years because it gave me an opportunity to learn about 2 areas that I hadn't been able to learn about in South Africa at that time. And one was on learning about homosexuality. I didn't know anything. I hadn't learned anything about that. And number 2, I had to learn about black writers. I needed to know the history of us as African people. I hadn't learned that in school in South Africa because then we were learning about the Voortrekker or whatever, you know. So it was a wonderful year, and I took courses and learned a lot. So it was a wonderful first 4 years. The 4 years of my undergrad degree. But I thought that what I would do today is really just focus on this area that I've been asked to focus on, which is the business side of this. And I guess for many instances, it can appear as something that is almost undoable, and that is to start a business. And the area of business that I'd like to focus on is more on the small and medium-sized type enterprises. And somebody was mentioning earlier, the gentleman in the back there, that you're running a business that is more small or medium-sized. And because this is such it's a different area to be able to run a business in, I think to be in big corporate is by far the easiest thing that you can do. Once you're a professional, you get into that and get moved into different roles and all of that. And I've had the good fortune of being able to do that, both when I was in New York working for Fieldstone and also here in South Africa in the various organizations that I've worked for. The last one having been Shanduka and now Sigma Capital, which I founded in 2015. But I think to start a business from scratch is without a doubt the most difficult thing that anybody can do. In my case, I found it a lot easier because I think the biggest issue in business is really, what you form in terms of relationships, because you're constantly interacting with people. So whether it's a supplier who can give you product at the right price, or whether it's a customer, whatever the case is, regulations, it's helpful when you've got the relationships. But I thought I'd just go into a bit more statistics, just looking at a bit more of issues that affect the LGBTI people, and I looked at the index, and I saw that there's an index that's looking at employment equity that was just launched last night, or is it today? It's been launched today. Yeah, I saw an article that came out it came out earlier in the year actually. But in any case, this is the Worldwide Workplace Index compiled by Silver Swan Recruitment, and South Africa in that ranked as number 26 in the world for LGBT workers. I don't think that one can necessarily applaud at this stage. I think it's a work in progress. It just shows that there's still a lot of work to be done. The average salary and equality of LGBTI people in the country was rated as being in the top 30 in a study that included 75 countries. So there's clearly still, there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. Cape Town beaches, of course, were voted 6th best in the world. And in addition to being LGBTI friendly, South Africa holds a score of 68 out of 100 in a handy data website that measures safety for gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people in different countries. And based on this tool, South Africa scored 4 marks for marriage equality, sexual activity laws, and anti-discrimination laws. So, I then went further and had a look at corporations that are supporting LGBTI communities around the world, and came across the Workplace Pride, and saw some, really large organizations that are pushing. And, the issue is to make sure that we can have the same happening here in South Africa as well. I know that Bonang Mohale from Shell South Africa, has, I think he might have spoken at perhaps some presentations, but I saw some things of him speaking. So, you know, it shows that within Shell, it's within the whole continent. I would presume that with PwC and other organizations that are presented here in South Africa, that the same is happening. Because if it's not, that's something that needs to be pushed as well, to make sure that there is the same voice that you have in the US is happening right here in South Africa as well. And then to look at other organizations, because as the LGBTI community, you are buyers and sellers, and you know, you are part of the community. And you know, it's important that you are represented, just as important as it is for anybody else to be represented. And so, you know, I think it's important that we are focused on making sure that, you know, we are pushing the organizations that we're working for, if we're in corporate or if we're in enterprises, small and medium-sized enterprises, that we can push those enterprises to move further. But I guess at the end of the day, it is about standing out. And that's what I found. I found that, you know, and I had a bit of a problem when you mentioned earlier the issue of going to the hair salon and you know, and sort of behaving a little bit differently. I think, you know, you are who you are. You know, I can't change the fact that I'm black. I can't switch it off and on. You know, I'm always black. So the issue is to be able to stand out and to make a name for yourself and to really be able to pull, you know, and to be respected for who you really are, wherever you are. And I think that is something that is really important. And so from that perspective, you know, I think it's important that we're able to keep pushing. And I think one person who certainly is part of what I see as being the change in the world is somebody like Tim Cook at Apple, who stands out as, you know, the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, Apple, and has come out and, you know, and so the issue is to really be able to continue to lead and being true to who you really are. And, you know, but at the end of the day, not everybody is going to be leading a Fortune 500 organization or a top 10 JSE organization. Whatever organization it is that you're leading, make sure that you're pushing it to the best of your capabilities. So if I look at different opportunities, I had a look at different businesses, because I think for, you know, LGBTI people to be able to lead, you also need to own. You know, I don't think you can lead and not be owning, you know, your enterprise or your business, whatever the case is. So I had a look at different sectors that you know, I think will continue to be pushers in the economy. One is the food and beverages. You know, having been involved when I was the CEO of Shanduka, we owned a Coca-Cola bottling company and also McDonald's. And so I know food and beverages is a business to be in. And it will continue to be a business that is a leader. But the issue is on affordability. As I mentioned there, that you need to be able to manage the costs. Because I think when you look at the economy of South Africa, we've gone from a growth of 3% to now 1.7%, and it actually reduced even further by another 0.7%. And you know, so we're, you know, now in a recession. At the end of the day, we know that you do still need food and beverages, you know. And when you look around at beverages, you see that there's many much more affordable beverages that people have come up with, you know, apart from Coca-Cola. And, you know, even though back in the days when I was still at Shanduka, I would never mention any other product except, you know, Coca-Cola. But, you know, at the end of the day, people will find something that is affordable that they can, you know, be able to feed themselves with. Education is another area. This is a critical area in South Africa where many people are looking for affordable education, but they're looking for good quality education. We need to be finding different ways in which people can be educated. I attended a conference some time ago where there was this lady who came and she was with her children. So at the end of the conference, you know, people asked questions, And these kids were also putting up their hands. So I was thinking, well, okay, when I saw her with them, I kind of assumed maybe, she was running late and picked up the kids, couldn't drop them off at home. Now they're asking questions. And not only did they ask questions, but they had good questions to ask. So later on, after the conference, I went to her and met the kids, and I was quite curious. And she told me, no, her kids were not in, any school, and she was teaching her kids at home. And as part of their education, she takes them with her to conferences. They look at various issues that they're busy studying, and they go there and they participate, as any individual who's paid to access that conference. And, it just speaks to just the importance of education in whatever form. Education is just so critical. And I think in an environment like South Africa, there are so many opportunities for those who are in this space to be able to create businesses that will help South Africans who are trying to bring up children or are trying to get educated as adults. Eye care, for those of us who wear contact lenses, we can relate with this. I think that's another area. Building and construction supplies. We know that building and construction is an industry that has been in the doldrums for a while in South Africa. But, it's not about being a part of a big construction business, but it's looking at different services that can be provided within that industry. And then apart from that, in telecoms, I mean, when you look at Vox and many other businesses that have been started up and have grown into significant businesses, the opportunities are there. I know that with the private equity fund that I run now, we're busy looking at funding into a small startup telecoms business. Beauty and cosmetics. I mean, we'll always need beauty and cosmetics, just like we need food. So, that's another area. Whether you are looking at producing products or whether you are looking at ways in which people can be, enjoying themselves. There are different things that the markets are always looking at different products that can be availed to them. And I think for us as people who are living in this continent, we know the environment. It's for us to be able to come up with the products that are required by the consumers of this nation, rather than waiting for products to come in from overseas. In the automotive sector, as you'll see, that fewer people are buying new cars in this current financial climate, and they're hanging on to their older models. And so those aged vehicles now no longer have the, the motor plans, exactly. So now, it's a whole process of where do they get their parts and their repairs and, all of that, in a way that it makes people comfortable, is affordable, all of that. I think if there's one thing that's for sure is that being able to present a business that is affordable to people, is good quality, is something that will be important for the long term. And so I think from that perspective, it's important for us to be looking at various industries where we can supply. Now, the question one might ask is, this is all it's great. Do I just set up, print my business cards? Do I, we know it's not easy, right? And, I think even for me, having come from big corporate to starting my own business, I found it was hard. It's amazing how when you work for a big company or you work with certain people, when you're in the market, you're received very differently. Wait until you leave. You'll find a different reception. And so, starting up, and I remember in Shanduka, we ran a part of the business which is now part of the Sir Ramaphosa Foundation, called Black Umbrellas, which is focused on entrepreneurs. And so we're always telling entrepreneurs, start up these businesses. And I remember I would say, guys, come on. It's just common sense, You just go to a bank, raise the capital, start the business, get this thing moving, until I had to start my own. And it was another experience. I have a lot more respect in terms of business startups. So we know that it is tough. and going through long periods of not earning an income is, I think, the most difficult part of it. But without a doubt, it is key that if you are passionate and focused on creating a new business and you believe that with this business you can make a change in the market, that you can stay focused on it and continue to develop the business over the long term. What I often say is that, whilst you're working, perhaps save up some money so that you can be able to at least pay your expenses in those dry periods leading up to the business being able to start making money. And then once you start, growing, you then are able to take it from there. And I guess even with growth, it presents its own challenges because there are people that you'll bring into your business who like a startup type environment. And it's different, a startup type environment, because you're not going to put lots of laws and sort of legislation around how you do business and all of this. It's more about getting that rand on the table. But at the end of the day, it is also about being able to create a sustainable business. So what often happens, and what I've seen happen, is that from the startup period, when you then go into being a more established business, and you have to now introduce certain ways of engaging with parties, whether it's your shareholders or whatever, then you start to see people leaving. I remember that with Shandika, so when we started with that business, we started out as a happy crowd. It was wonderful. Every Friday we had a mega party. Awesome stuff. It was really, really wonderful. And, and then as the business started to grow, we had to start introducing different ways of doing things, like, we can't have the chairman or the CEO of the company dancing on the table, like, guys, you can't be taking somebody's shoes and putting alcohol and making them find it, all of those things. But, so what happened was that as we grew into a medium-sized firm, we then started to see people leave. And not because they didn't like the company, but just because they enjoyed being in more of a startup type of organization more than being in a corporate. And they were saying, look, I left corporate to be in a startup because I like being in this type of environment. I don't like being in this big corporate type of environment. So that introduced other elements. It meant that we had to bring in people who would be comfortable being in a corporate type organization, because by then we'd grown to a business of over 10 billion rand, and so in NAV terms, and so we had to run things in a more responsible way. And so from that perspective, the culture in the organization had to change. And so that's what you'll see as well as you grow your business, that it will get to that stage. I think with this business that we've started, I've already decided on the next, what will happen next. Fortunately, I'm not looking to become like a great CEO or anything any longer. So all I want is just to make sure that we can find the right people who can lead this business as we're moving forward. So yeah, we've started our business. We've raised money for our fund. We're investing into other businesses, and and I'm hoping that I'm using what I learned in other businesses to be able to grow our business, and also to generate the type of culture that you want to see in your business. So yeah, I think starting a business is not easy by far, but I think, as Alice Walker once said, the most common way people give up their power is by thinking that they don't have any. So if you're going to start something, first you have to believe in self, believe that you can do it, and go out there and give it a try. I wouldn't say go and do it without any planning, but certainly give it a try. I've seen it work, and I know that many of us need to do this if we're going to be pushing this economy forward. Thank you.
good to end off on words of encouragement after all of the problems that we encounter in this journey. There's so many things to do, but so little time. So I'm going to try and wrap this up as soon as possible. We're going to get Lee Francis from ABSA to come and give us closing remarks just now. But let's again recognize the sponsors who made this possible, the summit possible in particular. We have EY, we have ABSA, of course, Uber as well, quite prominent in this, even moderating at one point. So it's not just a company that's sponsoring, but very active as well. Shell and LGBT Plus Forum, just some of the sponsors that we saw today. ABSA, we can only thank you again and again and again for the venue, for the catering, for hosting us like true celebs, because I think everybody wants to be treated properly when they go to any event. So I'll come back and give closing remarks about what we've discussed, where we're ending up after Lee Francis.
Thank you. So final words from me, and you are absolutely welcome. It's been a pleasure to host you today, so hopefully you've enjoyed the event. And I just want to say thank you to the team behind the scenes who have made this work, so thank you very much for that. So just final words, because I know it's running late. One thing that I forgot to mention this morning, but I think it's probably more prominent now when I listen to some of the conversations that's taking place. In ABSA, we're a little bit obsessed by something called Africanacity. You've probably seen that, but let me just explain to you why we're obsessed with this and what it means. And it talks about an African ability to always find a way to get things done. Okay, and you might have seen that in some of our recent advertising. But if I think about some of the things that we've spoken about today, actually that sums up exactly what it is we're trying to achieve. We've spoken about connecting with each other in the last session. We've spoken about joining hands. We've spoken about being collaborative. And we've spoken about sharing resources. So whether we're part of a corporate such as ABSA or one of the other sponsors, or small to medium to largest type businesses, actually if we join hands together, then actually that's really how we're going to take this forward, and that's that Africanacity piece that I just want to finish with. So that's my final words. So thank you to the other foundation once again for allowing us to be part of this. Also plus the LGBTI Business Network and the other sponsors. It's really, really been awesome. And I'm hoping that most of us are going to be heading over to EY very soon. I know we're running late. And look forward to seeing the results of the South African Workplace Equality Index later, which we've seen little snippets of, but yeah, we're looking forward to seeing that. So, that's it from me. Thank you very much for coming, and I'll hand back to you to finish off. Thank you.
All right, guys, so it's hard to sum something like this up because people will agree and disagree on what we spoke about, but we set out a goal to put up a good, conclusive business model as to why it's relevant for the LGBTI community to be recognized when it comes to doing business in South Africa. We raised questions about the economic impact and power and muscle we have to flex 53 million buy power that the community has, buying power. We also know that, when it comes to work ethic, somehow people in the community are overachievers because of the oppression we faced growing up. We couldn't be ourselves growing up in our families because we were too afraid. So lots of us left home at an early age, studied and pushed through to be successful. It was somehow meant to compensate for the small oppression, some would say, compared to apartheid that we suffered during apartheid as well. The goal was to start the dialogue and discussion on the way forward. I think we managed to do that by putting each other in touch with how we can help each other out as businesses when it comes to linking up LGBTI businesses. We also managed to talk about the political and human rights aspects that this requires. The Human Rights Commission was here. Gail Smith spoke about how their equity report is actually looking at the smaller side to BEE, for instance, and how we should be recognized in terms of, getting that extra, and I don't want to call it special because it's not special, getting that recognition that we require when it comes to BEE, which currently our laws don't legitimize or, as we want it, to be recognized. So the Human Rights Commission is looking at putting that forward to government. Government has been given 90 days to respond. We know we're getting some sort of leeway into how this is going to work in terms of legislation. Now that we have facts on the way forward, now that we know that there are organizations like PLUS to put us in touch with each other, organizations like the Other Foundation that also will help entrepreneurs, aspire to be successful, we need to use it. And again, I'll remind you to become a member of PLUS. The forms are all over the place. You had it in your diaries as well. Fill it in. Submit it to Anzio at the front when you're leaving. It's important to get connected and not complain that the summit was here just for us to talk and now we don't know what to do. PLUS is going to work very hard to connect people, to connect businesses, so that we can take the conversation forward, because this is just a start, really. You can't in 9 hours think of a plan to get a so-called LGBTI Chamber of Commerce going, because that's not going to happen. The input that the moderators gave, and we'll put them up on screen now, was incredible. The panelists as well, giving us insights into businesses, into different aspects that will help us going forward into how to actually make us inclusive. Because that's what it is. It's a new dawn to LGBTI inclusivity in the business sector. That's the way I look at it, and this is the starting point. There's lots of people to thank here today. The Other Foundation, in particular, for also driving this particular summit. Shikeshe, you, of course, going out of your way to make everything seamless. I mean, nobody wants to be recognized specifically for these things because we're doing it for a good cause. Neville as well. I mean, I met with them before coming here. And it's great to meet people with passion. They're not doing this for money, because business people generally have to have a good idea to make money. They're there to help those business people actually be successful. Tendai, everybody behind the scenes, guys, thanks so much, appreciate it. And then, of course, plus Dean, Andrea. Andrea, your words of encouragement before this even started got me going. It gave me the encouragement that I needed to look outside the box, to think in a way that's forward-thinking. You opened up my mind even before the summit started. And if you guys spoke to each other, you would have noticed that that is the case. That was what the summit was about, connecting. I'm trying to find the one thing that I will take away from this. It's Lindiwe Sikali. I mentioned it again. You said we were equal, but we are different. And that the first thing we must get used to is to get married to that difference. Whether you recognize your difference and how you recognize your difference is up to you, because we're all individuals. You use your difference in whatever way you want. Some people might not want to be separatist, segregated even further as an LGBTI business community. Others would want to. We want the advantage of that, given the work we've put in, given the oppression that we've endured along this journey. So you can do with it whatever you want to. EY, of course, 102 Rivonia Road, that's where you're going to get the results of this index. It's quite interesting because some of the figures were mentioned. It's the South African Workplace Equality Index report launch. It's the first of its kind, and it's, of course, something that will give us a better idea as to the power and numbers we have in the workplace in terms of LGBTI and numbers. Then you can go to companies and say, hey, we know the figures, you need to start acting. Andrea again said we need to push the agenda where companies are held accountable. You can't expect to talk about it here and not go back to our own companies and CEOs and NGOs and unions even who are here and not tell them to start doing something about it. Companies need a framework for LGBTI workers. They need to start pushing this agenda. They need to stop saying to us that it costs too much, or we don't have the money to hire people to do it. Puti, you mentioned doing work with businesses. I hope you include the LGBTI community in that and take that into consideration. You have the power to do that. You don't need a board to tell you to do this. You don't need workers to tell you to do it. And that's how you actually start the conversation. Let me end with this. And it's something that I read while I was doing research for this summit, because I want to end on words of encouragement. And it's something that comes from the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. He says, if we are to achieve faster global progress towards equality for lesbian, gay, bi, trans, and intersex people, business will not only have to meet their human rights responsibilities, they must become active agents of change. Let's all be those active agents of change, wherever we are, whichever company we work in. Thank you so much for listening to me. Thank you so much for participating. I mean, your input, of course, is something that we value. And thanks for attending. I hope to see you guys soon. Yeah.